They're Italian daggers from different parts of Italy. You might not be able to read this, but it's EID.MAR. Anybody have an idea? When was Caesar killed? On the Ides of March. And then that's Brutus. You can see that by B-R-U-T-U-S. Brutus issues a coin celebrating the assassination of Caesar, showing that he has given back freedom to the Romans on the Ides of March. And in fact, when he leaves the theater of Pompey, he says to the Romans, "You have been given your freedom back. The tyrant is dead." And he hoped, he expected that they would act like the descendants back, the ancestors back in 509. Hooray, we have our freedom. Instead, the plebes just kind of stood there and said, "Well, we liked Caesar. He was a nice guy." Another coin of Brutus. You can tell it's Brutus because he puts his name there. These are the officials. Remember that set fasces, see? That's the rod and axe, the symbol of a Roman magistrate who gives freedom to a slave. And there's Libertas. So Brutus's view is that he has given back freedom. But the Roman people don't want it. They don't need it, they say. You then have the rise of Julius Caesar's nephew. His name is Octavian, don't need to worry about that. His real name, he later changes his name to Augustus. Augustus, after 15 years of civil war, finally wins, and he establishes the Res Publica. He reestablishes it. But he didn't. Augustus destroys it. Why? Because while he is smarter than Caesar in terms of politics, he knows not to use the term king. He holds all the power. It's a military dictatorship. It is the end of political freedom. And we have to understand that that's what the plebes wanted. They didn't care anymore about the political freedom. What they cared about was security. Security from having armies march through their farmlands, march through their homes. Augustus, this is a famous statue of Augustus. It's in the Vatican if you go. The nice thing about it is that it shows him as a military general. This little guy down here, that's freedom. That's Libertas. But he's showing, see, he has restored Libertas. The Republic is no longer needed, although we will call it the Republic for the next 1,000 years. It's no longer needed. And the reason why it's no longer needed is because he has brought peace and security. To the Romans now, Libertas morphs into a different idea. We see this in Augustus' official name. Imperator Caesar Divi Filius Augustus. If you ever want a good name, this is one. What is Imperator? Anybody have an idea? Emperor. What does emperor mean? No. That's rest. We don't want to see you. We don't use the word king.
Ruler?
Close. All-conquering general. Not a bad first name, right? Caesar. Well, that refers back to Julius Caesar. Everybody refers to Julius Caesar. Caesar was declared a god. And so he's Caesar Divi Filius. Filius means son, son of the divine Caesar. Can any of you claim divinity? He could. He was the adopted son of Julius Caesar, therefore he was his son, and therefore he was the son of a god. Augustus. Anybody know what Augustus means? Take off the last two. August. What does August mean? You want to say a month, but it's not. Anyway?
Peace.
What's that?
It's a peace.
Close. Savior. all-conquering general, son of the god Caesar, savior of the Roman world. Now, if you want a name, pick that one. Because I'll tell you, no one can ever top that. Because basically it meant that he was a god. And he commemorates this by issuing a coin here with Divus Julius, the divine Caesar. Puts it here, there, and puts up a little star. Because the way they commemorated Julius Caesar was that when Caesar's body was burned, a comet flew across the sky. And they said, see, Caesar's being carried into the heavens. So Augustus claims that he is the son of the divine. And he has brought peace and security. And that is what was important to the Romans. The idea that peace returns after a century of war. So, under the empire, liberty now means no longer freedom to elect their own officials. It meant freedom to be happy or successful in business and life. All of the offices are now controlled by the emperor. People want peace. What is more important to them was security. They are willing to give up political control for that type of peace. We might look at that as alien. But think about it. How much are you willing to give up for peace and security? Back in 1938, Neville Chamberlain returns from Berchtesgaden with a piece of paper declaring peace in our time, because he is willing to give up the Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, to Hitler, just so that we don't have war. 1914, the German army moves through Belgium. If the Germans had known that Belgium had a secret treaty with England, they wouldn't have gone through it. The secret treaty was signed a century earlier, guaranteeing freedom. There, the Brits did live up to it. The result was the First World War with close to 50 million dead. So where do we draw the line in our own lives? Well, for the Romans it was simple. They were tired. They were tired of the war. They wanted that peace and security. They wanted free reign, which is what Julius Caesar had given them. They wanted chariot races, plebs and circus, or bread and circus, because it gave them enjoyment. And again, I always come back to your own life. How many of you have cable TV? Well, aren't you a slave to it? Worst thing that can happen is a storm that knocks out your cable TV during NFL games. The Romans were no different. Well, at the end of Nero's reign, Nero was a descendant of Augustus, we have a revolution. A man by the name of Galba marches on Rome, and he brings about libertas, or the republic, or the publica, public liberty. But he's not talking about bringing back freedom for politics. He's talking about bringing back freedom from the insanity of Nero. He's returning some kind of semblance of security for the people after the great fire in Rome that destroyed Rome during Nero's reign, who he blamed the Christians. After his great palace being built. After the building of a great statue of himself. Galba announces that he is returning sanity. And what does he have? He's got the goddess Libertas, and there's that cap, that Peleus, the cap of freedom. Not a negative, but rather a positive. He's returning freedom. And in fact, successive emperors would point to this. The next Galba gets killed, by the way. That's all right. I mean, it's not but Vespasian becomes emperor. And here you see Bill mentioned public works, useless public works, always like that. Well, which are better? Private works that are grandiose, or public works for the good of the community? Well, Vespasian would have said public. So he destroys Nero's palace. He bulldozes it. If you go to Rome today, you can actually go in it. It's underground. It was discovered during the Renaissance when artists went down and they saw all these beautiful paintings in the grotto. Hence we get the term grotesque. It comes from grotto. If you go, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. They just opened it about 15 years ago. On top of it, however, he built public baths. Romans like baths, you know, they like to be clean. Wonderful place. The private lake of Nero is drained. And in its place, the Colosseum is built. The statue of Nero still remained, but they called it the god Helios. So, you know, they just changed the name. Okay. So, in other words, Vespasian turned these private pleasures into public pleasures. Antoninus Pius also issues a coin. Now, his is not during a civil war. His is during the great Roman peace, Pax Romana, when Rome is at its height, 160 AD. But again, we have libertas with the Peleus, with the cap. In other words, freedom now meant freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom from pain. It means that the emperor has brought peace and security. Well, let's move now 1,700 years ahead, and we get to the period of our founding fathers. And if you read our founding fathers, you suddenly notice that they hate democracy. If you read the Federalist Papers, you have these wonderful arguments against or in favor of a different thing. And they sign it Cato, Brutus, Cassius. These are the very people who opposed Caesar, who opposed his dictatorship. In other words, they were trying to show the connection between the Roman Republic and their own times. And they did not want a democracy. And the reason why they didn't want a democracy was because of this man, Socrates. Not that they hated Socrates. No, 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 no. They loved Socrates. But what happened to him? Socrates was an Athenian who in the year 397 BC is brought up on charges of corrupting the youth and believing in strange gods in Athens. He is found guilty by the Athenian people. A jury of 501 voted. It came close. It was about 265 to 240, whatever the math turns out to be. And at that point, you enter into the penalty phase. And this is where you see how philosophers, and we have one here, but not to denigrate them, but Socrates wasn't too bright as far as public opinion. Each was supposed to give their view of what the penalty should be. Well, the prosecution asked for death. I mean, prosecution always asks for death, right? You steal a loaf of bread, you know, jaywalk death. So he said death. Socrates came up and said, well, you know, since you found me guilty of speaking the truth and speaking about freedom, you should give me a pension. And I should be given free room and board for the rest of my life. Now understand, he's just been found guilty, right? So the crowd, the jury now votes about 375 to about 125 for death. But for our founding fathers, they viewed this image of the people of Athens killing Socrates. I mean, he deserved it, by the way. I mean, mind you, if you're somebody, he said, no, come on. You say, give me a pension and all that. No, he didn't deserve to be found guilty of the first charge, which was corrupting the youth and believing in strange gods. But for insulting the people of Athens, yes, he did. But that's beside the point. But our founding fathers, had this view of the rabble, the crowd. That's why they liked the Republic of Rome, because it gave them order. For our founding fathers, the term libertas, liberty, meant political freedom. They wanted the political freedom to decide their destiny. Hence, we have the establishment of the writing of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. But for them, they were hearkening back to the Republic of Rome. So when we look at liberty, we have to understand it changes over time. And it changes based upon one's perception. And it changes based upon your own set of happenings. For the Romans, under the Republic, it meant freedom to decide their political future. And hopefully that's what it means for us. Thank you.